Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to just jump right into our drawing and do some Zentangle together. So grab your pen, your tile, and let's get started. So I'm going to start right down here in that lower left corner, and we're going to just draw a flux shaped teardrop, if you will. And then we're going to use an anchored aura, so we're going to tie it to this bottom left corner, and we're going to aura up around this shape and just create a little bit of a close aura. And then we're going to do that again, but we're going to make it wider. And then we'll do that once more, again with a smaller aura. So we've made what looks like little rows here. Now on this wider aura, this space that we've created, we want to use a shape or a pattern similar to what's known as Marasu. We're going to just make some little curved lines. Let me zoom in for you. Lines with a little bit of a curve to them, which will help indicate a roundness. And we're going to just follow around this area and create a few sets of these parallel curves, something like that. And now we'll go ahead and ink those in. We'll add the ink to the space in between those little lines that we've made, creating some little bands, if you will, that go across that center aura. Now, if you're not familiar with the Marasu Tangle, this is not actually that tangle, but we're doing a Marasu-like version to fill in this aura. So now we want to add a second set of little curved lines just outside where we made that little band. It just enhances this pattern just a little bit and keeps it in company with the Marasu Tangle, as I said. And now around this outside, we want to create some orbs and then a center orb, almost like a little donut shape. And they should bump right up against each other and up against that outer aura line. But there's not a worry about being ultra precise here, or if you make the sizes different, that's okay too. But we want to create this little pattern that goes all the way around this shape that we've created. And here I want to draw another of these little flux-like teardrop shapes. And we're going to create the same pattern that we did right here. We've got a few more of these we want to draw. Let's do one that comes right up here. And we'll repeat this same pattern again. And don't worry if your lines are shaky or not perfectly evenly spaced. It's okay. We're just adding patterns, and once we do all the other details of our drawing and shade it in, any little imperfections will just become lost in the drawing. And I'm doing this drawing today with you as a sort of a warm-up drawing. So my hands are shaky and my steadiness is not yet in gear, so to speak, because I'm just drawing for the first time today and just trying to get my hands warmed up. And each of these shapes takes a few minutes to draw, but it gives us a chance for a little focus and Zen flow, perhaps, as we just get into the rhythm of each individual component. Part of the fun of drawing is that we're in no big hurry. It's not a race. I don't care who gets done first, who goes the fastest or the slowest, it doesn't matter. What matters is you're creating and you're having fun. I'm going to add an additional of these seed shapes or little teardrop shapes over here. Now I'm going to add just a few smaller flux patterns here. Sort of that traditional shape of the flux in Zentangle. Just going to fill in a few to give my other patterns some accompaniment. Just filling in a few of these areas here. And let's add just a few over here. And like I said, we're just doing this, at least I'm just doing this as a warm-up today. And so it's just a fun way for me to create along with you, or you to create along with me, perhaps I should say. We just want to have some fun drawing some patterns. We're not looking to change the world here with a drawing that we do, but we are looking to change ourselves by creating something and having some fun with that. Where we're going to go next is we're going to use another very common shape, is the Mooka shape. And we're going to draw some up here just to fill in some space, and again to get our creative juices going, and also to warm up our hands, give our minds a chance to rest. And let's see, let's draw another one on this side. And let's have another one coming up here. A little smaller, as you can see. All right, and now let's maybe fill just a few more of these flux shapes. Now that we know where those Mookas are hiding, we can get a few of these additional shapes into this pattern here. Just put them wherever you think they would look good. All right. And now I'm going to add just a little to accompany my flux shapes there, or not flux, my Mooka shapes. I'm going to just throw in a few little fescues to help with some little details. And by throwing those in there, we can also add a sense of depth by drawing behind, kind of that over and under appearance. It just helps convey that, so it's just an easy and fun way that we can add that. Just a handful of little shapes. And now what I'm going to do is ink in the areas in between the flux shapes that may have been created when we drew them. So you might have small areas, you might have large areas. It just depends how you drew your shapes, whether you overlapped them, whether you drew them right next to each other, etc. But any area that is closed in, so to speak, let's fill that in with some ink. We'll add a little contrast to this pattern here today. A little darkness in the drawing for contrast, or drama, what they sometimes like to call it in Zentangle. If you see an area and you think, boy, I really would like to ink that in, but it's not closed off, just draw another flux pattern and fill it in then. Give yourself the little spot that you're hoping for. Now as I look at this, I think I'm also going to ink in my little spaces or the interstices between my donut shapes. That'll give me a little bit more ink drama going on. So here, we'll zoom in again. So in areas like this, where there are little gaps, I'm going to fill those little gaps in as best my eyesight can detect anyway. Just going to fill in all these little open areas to sort of give a cohesion to this whole piece, or not the whole piece, but to these separate patterns, I should say. We'll kind of bring them together a little bit this way, make them look like they're a unified whole. Whole as in W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E. And this is pretty tiny areas, hard to see. On camera it looks bigger, but it is very tiny on my drawing. Makes it a little hard for my old man eyes to see that. But forgive me if it looks sloppy, but at an arm's distance it's going to look just fine, which is how these art pieces are designed to be viewed, so to speak. So I'm just going to continue around these shapes now and fill these little spaces wherever I find them. We're going to add little roundings in the corner, so to speak, where these pieces are made up, and just add a little bit more ink to the process that way as well. So now that we've done that, we actually can begin our shading process. Now, one of the chief areas that we're going to lay this down is along these edges of our, what I called our Marasu-Inspired piece here. And I'm just going along the lines on the outside and inside. And this graphite, when we spread it, I'll show you here in just a moment, it's not going to stay put in some precise little area. So we want to be able to disperse that around and add a sense of value and depth and sizing to that center piece. Now you can see it's very subtle, but once we've done it to all of them, it will really help bring these pieces to life. Now I'm actually going to use a slightly different pencil here that's a little bit darker, actually, a little darker graphite. I want to make this a little more pronounced, so I'm using a darker graphite now, a softer. I'm going to go ahead and do that around all of these shapes. And on a shape like this, when we shade or add value like this around the edges, it makes that shape appear as those edges are rolling away from us, so that that centerpiece is higher, so to speak, and it gives the impression of roundness and dimension to it. And that's by design here. That's why what we're trying to do. But we'll also add a little highlight at the end down the center that will enhance that impression even further. All right. I'm also going to add a little graphite here, as I often do in the tips of these flux shapes, so that I can disperse that and add some value to those shapes, make them not just plain old white. And I'm going to add a little bit around where they overlap. Doesn't require much, because we can spread this graphite very easily. We'll do that here also in these on the edge. And we'll add a little bit around here. Now, I normally just do the smiley face thing, but I'm going to do little circular shapes with less pressure, because I don't want to create a harsh line, but I just want to follow the general curvature of this Mooka, the tip of the Mooka there, so that when I blend this graphite, it will help create, again, that sense of roundness or dimension with a reflected light edge as well as the shadow. Now, another thing I do want to do, I want to add some graphite around the base of my donut shapes that we put all the way around, so that we can create a little bit of a value shadow difference there as well. So I'm going to do that to all my primary shapes around the bottom part. If we will blend this, we're not going to worry about trying to trace out an exact shape to all these little tiny pieces. If we were drawing this at a larger scale, or if we were doing a different type of art, we would be perhaps more concerned with precision on the shading here. But we're just trying to create a sense of value, which will then lend itself to a sense of shape or dimensionality to our little pieces. That's all we're doing. Trying to get rid of the flat, two-dimensional appearance of our shapes by just adding some values to it. All right, so once we've laid down that graphite, we can now gently smooth this out, and create our dimensions, our 3D effect. You can see how that worked there. And I might add just a hint of that graphite, just whatever's on my tortillon or blending stump, just a hint of it to the stem of that Mooka so that it doesn't look quite so white and flat. Alright, and now we can add that same subtle brush with our tortillon to this outer edge. I'm just blending that graphite from the bottom up into those donut shapes a little bit. And we'll do the same just gently with our flux shapes. Just bringing some tone up. So again, these don't look completely flat. I don't know if it will help zoom in a little bit here so you can see just, I'm not being concerned with exactly where or how I blend that, just that I do. Alright, oh, whoops, we got our other fluxes over here. And now we want to finish doing our initial shapes by blending around those edges. And yeah, it makes the whole piece look a little gray, and that's alright. And then I'm just using a circular motion on my little donut shapes to pick up some of that graphite from the bottom and move it outward without being perfectly uniform. We want some variance in how that lays across those little donut shapes, just to make the eye will see that as subtle differences in tonal quality, little white highlights and little darkened shadows, and it just creates a simple illusion for us without having to work too hard at it. And you can already see that that really brings some life to this piece, but we're not done. So we want to take our graphite again. I'm going to add a little bit of darkness at the base of my Mooka shapes. I will blend that, but I just want to sort of segregate that a little bit with that darkness. Gives a little hint of dimension there. And now I'm going to also add a little bit of a shadow, like a drop shadow, around this bottom and right and left edges here a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. Alright, now lastly, on mine, I'm going to create some really dark spots in the corners, lower corners of my initial flux teardrop shapes. I'm going to leave it kind of a jagged ending, and I'm going to blend that up into this white. So I'm just adding some nice dark graphite here at the base, in the corner, so to speak. And then I can take this blending stump and just soften that and push it around here, leaving little bits of white poking through on purpose so that it creates a gradated effect, a graduated shade. Now, if we had used colors, this might almost turn it into a gem, a Zen gem they call that sometimes. And you could do that if you wanted to and add some white highlights, but I just want to keep this drawing black and white in my case today. I'm just doing it as a nice little warm-up and having you come along with me for the ride. I almost forgot here before we ended for the day to add our highlight down the center of our Marasu piece, and I'm just using a charcoal pencil, white charcoal pencil, just because it blends right onto here very easily without leaving. You could use a white pen like a gel pen as well, but it would leave almost too bright of a highlight and it would not look convincing on the sort of faded grayish background of our graphite there. So I like to use these pencils when I'm doing something like this, just to add a subtle highlight at the peak of our rounded shape here. Again, just convincing the eye of that shape that was helped by our shadows along the edges, and now it's being enhanced by this little white highlight across the top. And I almost forgot to do that. Here I finished with the shading and signed the tile, and I wasn't quite done, so I wanted to come back and do this real quick and just show you what a difference this really can make. I think we can certainly call this a finished drawing for today, and thank you so very much for joining with me. I look forward to seeing everyone again real soon back here in the Tangles and Toons channel, and until then, take care. Bye-bye now.